everyone, Antoinette Montalvo for Montalvo International, and we're just really excited for starting a very new segment in our Women In series on purpose and identity. I have an incredible woman that's here to join us today, so definitely stay tuned because you are going to learn so much from it. We are so glad that you're here. Thanks for joining us. Hi everyone, I'm Antoinette Montalvo, and we are just so excited for this brand new segment in our Women In series that we're starting. I have the privilege and the honor to be speaking with an incredible woman, Pamela Davis. She is an associate pastor of Christ Community Church of Philadelphia. Just a powerful woman. She's been my spiritual mentor. She has mentored hundreds and hundreds of women and just has so much insight and just wisdom in terms of women and purpose and identity and just what God calls us to be. And so I'm just really thankful for having you here and just overjoyed of just the opportunity that we have to share. And so we're just really, really excited to have you. So thank you so much for being here. But before I keep going on and on, just to give you a little preview as to what we're going to be talking about, purpose and identity, especially as it applies to women, is huge. I mean, there's just so much wrapped in how we identify ourselves, how we look at ourselves, think about ourselves, not just in the beauty sense, but also too in terms of our purpose and vision in life and where we're going in life and how we connect with other people. And I recently got a chance to listen to you speak to our congregation, specifically with women, and just blown away by the insight that you had. And it really reminded me a lot of where my purpose actually lies, because so many seasons and so many things that happen in our life can just change us. It can move us. It can keep us from even embracing that. And so I knew that I had to have others get a chance to hear some of that. So I'm just thankful for you to share some of that with us.
I'm honored to be here and share with you.
Well, we're really looking forward to it. So maybe just so that the audience can get to know you a little bit, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your background. I can go on and on, but sometimes it makes it easier if they hear it directly from you. So
Sure, absolutely. Well, like you said, my name is Pamela Davis. I was born right here in Philadelphia. I really didn't have any idea that I'd end up here pastoring a church with hundreds of people with my husband, Terry Davis. But that's part of the destiny that God called me to.
Right.
It's been a discovery journey of finding out who I am, finding out the destiny that God's called me to, and not coming to an end point, but getting put on the right road of that healthy, godly identity, so that I can no longer live in the identities that have shaped me in the past, but live in God's identity that He designed to move me forward into His destiny, which is where we're all called to be.
Wow. And I mean, I'm sure it was a process, right? It takes time to get there, but
such a process.
It's always great to know that you can get there for sure. So I guess just to help people understand, what does purpose and identity mean? Maybe you can tell us, maybe from a biblical stance. There are some people who may or may not understand the biblical stance of purpose and identity, so I think it's really important to define that. How would you define what that looks like?
Well, I think I'd start by kind of taking us back to the beginning. By the beginning, I mean Genesis, when we know Adam and Eve made the big oops, and they brought us to a place of separation from God. But what that really was a change in our identity.
Interesting.
God always meant for us to be directly connected to Him, to live in close relationship with a deep intimacy with Him. And what that big oops did was separate that intimacy, was to cut us off from the right relationship and consequently cut us off from the right identity.
Right.
So rather than be in a place of closeness, we came to a place of shame. If you look in Genesis in chapter 2, the end of chapter 2, it says that Adam and Eve were with God, they were naked and they were unashamed. But then in the very next chapter, when they ate the fruit, it said that they were naked, they were ashamed, they hid themselves. And so that cutoff of intimacy produced a shame in us. And now that was, as their descendants, that was passed on to us. And so now we exist in a state of, that shame says there's something wrong with me. There's something that's not right. There's something that needs to be fixed. There's something that I need to fix. And so from those wrong identities, I spent a lifetime of trying to fix what I think is wrong. What happened was Jesus came, and with salvation, he created a new identity for us. He reconnected that intimacy that was destroyed by Adam and Eve.
Right.
But even though he reconnected, there's still all of those mentalities, all those ideas, those identities that have been created in each one of us by all kinds of different ways.
Right.
Our parents, relationships, cultural things, even generational things from our generational line
Right.
that tend to shape our identity. So while Jesus paid for our sin and restored connection, we're all still left with those scarred
Right.
identities
Right.
that God never meant us to have. That's the enemy's plan.
Wow.
To scar our identity so that he can then distort and destroy our real destinies in God.
And that's, I mean, that's a true identity crisis in that. And I can
That's
think,
the ultimate of
wow.
identity crisis.
wow. And I'm
Yeah.
sure there's so many people, not only women, that struggle with that to
It's a
an
people
incredible level, right?
It's a people issue. I think that women tend to show it more. We tend to be more emotional.
Right.
And so sometimes they show up in more dramatic and demonstrative kind of ways.
Right.
But they all come from different sources. You know, just in preparing for this, I was asking God, how do you let people know how to discover how your identity was formed
Right.
and what to do with it?
Right.
And so he said, just be a little transparent. Talk to people about where you came from.
Wow.
What kind of things shaped your identity, just to give them an idea
Right.
of how it happens.
Right, right.
And also that you're not alone in those things that formed who you believe you
Right,
are,
right.
that may not be true.
Right. So maybe you would be willing to share a little bit of,
Absolutely.
your journey onto how you thought of yourself, maybe your identity before, and really coming into that truth of where your identity really lies.
Yeah. Well, we'll fast forward to that stage of salvation.
Okay.
That many of us come to. And we say, yes, I know there's a need in me. I need Jesus. I understand what you did. I welcome that salvation. Please connect me to God again. I accept you as my Savior. I want you as my Lord. And let's make that decision. And I made that decision.
Wow.
But then started a journey of discovering that there was something broken. There was something, that shame mentality that said there's something wrong with me. And no matter how I try to get around that, there's something that I think I need to fix. You spend a lifetime in picking bad relationships, doing things to try to heal and fill that void that salvation has paid for, but there has to be a discovery of where those identities and those pains even have come from.
Right.
So in my own journey, when I was 5 years old, I had some very severe burns. I had 3rd-degree burns. I think the enemy was actually trying to get rid of me at that point.
Wow.
I was 5 years old, and this was before the days of flame retardant sleepwear, and my sleepwear caught fire.
Wow.
I was in the hospital for several months with 3rd-degree burns. Had several surgeries of skin grafts to try to replace some of the tissues.
Right.
But I say that to say that I was left with a picture of there's something wrong with you.
Wow.
There was no time that I could look in the mirror and say everything's okay, because I could always see there's something wrong, there's something missing, there's something that's about you that's different and bad and wrong from what everybody else has been through, what everybody else deals with.
Right.
Now on top of that, I know everybody deals with some level of dysfunction in their family. I know my parents loved me and they did the best that they could. We have to all understand that our parents can only give us what they had.
Right.
They can only share with us and build into us what was built into them.
Yeah, so
Now,
true.
they came from an environment where feelings and emotions were not expressed. So I don't think there was ever a time that my 4 brothers and sisters and I heard, I love you.
Wow.
I'm proud of you. So that's, once again, just exemplified and solidified that there's something that's missing in you. So even with the piece of salvation in place, there's now that thing that says, I've got to do something.
Wow.
I've got to fix myself. Even now in the church, I've got to work hard, not realizing that the act of salvation was a complete work.
Wow.
And it wasn't just a work to get me out of sin. It was a work to restore intimacy and to restore my broken identity.
Right.
The identity that says, I am totally loved by
Wow.
God.
Yeah.
I'm created in his image. Before the foundation of time, he was thinking about me. So I began to feed on those kind of things.
Right.
So here's the truth of, and we may be skipping a little bit ahead,
That's
but
okay,
there's got to be a solution. In my mind, I'm never going to present you with a problem
Right.
without having a solution.
Right.
When whatever you look at is what you're going to reflect. In I think it's 2 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter, it says that we reflect God's glory.
Wow.
But that's just the nature of who we are. We're reflectors. We're like moons. They reflect the sun.
Yeah.
We reflect whatever we look at.
Right.
So as I reflected more on what God's image was, and this is a journey,
Right.
a journey of self-discovery, where I came from,
Right.
where the hurt and the pain, and that can be a little difficult.
Right.
But you often have to discover where the pain came from in order to discover healing for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And maybe you can talk a little bit more in terms of just, because we all encounter, and thank you so much for sharing some of that really personal insight, because I think that helps people understand. Oftentimes when you see someone who is in a position of influence or authority, you think, oh, they have it together, they've never gone through anything, and we know it's not true, but it's always good to have that physical reminder and to be told that we're not the only ones struggling, that we all come from broken backgrounds in some capacity, and even if we think everything looks great, there's still something that is missing in all of that. And so I appreciate that.
That's that piece of isolation that the enemy tries to build into our lives.
Right.
So it's not just the shame and the wrongness and there's something that needs to be fixed. It's the don't tell anyone. Keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
No one's going to understand. You're going to be ostracized because of how different you are. So please just make sure you keep that inside.
Very interesting.
When the very truth is that the more you reveal about that, the more healing comes. The word says that we're healed as we confess things to each other. And so of course the enemy is going to try to, once again, he starts back at the foundation.
So true.
He says, first I'm going to try to damage your identity, and then I'm going to try to keep you quiet about it. It's the same, can I say, demonic mentality that abusers use, that they say, don't tell anyone.
Wow.
Because you're going to be at fault.
Wow.
You're going to be seen as something wrong with you, and you're going to get in trouble if you reveal what happened when it was really not your fault at all.
Wow.
So that is a piece of healing that I give to all of us. Don't stay isolated. Reveal to someone.
Right.
Don't get up on the platform and reveal to hundreds of people, obviously.
Yeah.
But do some self-searching and some revelation in a trusted, safe environment.
Right.
Healing cannot occur without that release and without that help of finding where you came from, not for the sake of pain or revisitation for just the sake of revisitation, but to find out where the broken parts happen so that you can begin to mend them back together again.
Right. Wow.
Or that Jesus
Yes.
can begin to mend those back together.
And that, I mean, I think all the points that you said are just so important, because a lot of times we do try to struggle through. In considering women specifically, I think we build up this complex for ourselves of, you have to portray yourself as perfect, the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect friend, the perfect whatever that might be.
And they don't exist.
Absolutely not. And I'm learning that very quickly firsthand. And so, I mean, it's just so refreshing to hear that and to just be a part of that transparency and the reminder of knowing that isolation is really a trick. It's a tool to try to keep you from being able to move forward and where you really need to go.
Absolutely.
So it's important to point that out. And I guess kind of defining a little bit more of some of the things that really challenge identity. Maybe you can talk to how maybe the fear of failure or the fear of rejection, or a lot of the fears or things or challenges that happen in terms of just understanding or coming to the true sense of identity, how those things can really hold you back, but even how are practical ways to think about overcoming them. And I know there's those two big, really big questions, but
they're big ones.
Attack them as you can. So.
But I believe that it's probably not as complicated as we think it is. The fear part, I believe, comes from those root foundation relationships of where our identity came from.
Right.
Some of it may have come from bad relationships. you may have been with a man or a woman, but often with us women, it's a man who we've chosen to trust, who has betrayed something, whether it be emotionally or physically.
Right.
And so that in moving forward, we're now not able to trust. There's that fear of trust.
Right.
Sometimes there are cultural things.
Right.
You know, we each exist in a cultural world.
Yes.
We live in a society of so many different cultures.
Right.
And so there's just that fear of, I'm not going to be accepted because I'm yellow. I'm not going to be accepted because I'm white. I'm not going to be accepted because I'm dark. And so there's then that fear. So all fear, I believe, stems from something in your background that created that wrong identity. And that's why I believe that process of self-discovery.
Right.
And it's a journey.
Right.
It doesn't happen tomorrow. It doesn't happen next week.
If only.
I think, if only. But the thing is, if God were to reveal all those things that have been embedded in many of us for many, many years, we'd explode.
Yeah.
We can't handle it all at one time. We're
Right.
like onions.
Yeah.
And so he has to kind of peel back layers. And let me put it this way, display his glory through us in different levels.
That's really
He can
powerful.
only give us as much as we can handle.
Right. Right.
But he takes us through sometimes painful journeys to make us more able to handle the weight of what he wants to give us in us and through us, for ourselves and for other people.
Right. And that's such a good point, especially in thinking about our previous series when we were talking about miscarriage and pregnancy and loss. And, you know, the two women that spoke were just, I was just so thankful for them sharing their heart in that and thinking about, wow, this huge thing that they have had to endure and think about the beautiful thing that God can still do through them because of it, and how their identity can actually be strengthened, not pushed down, not torn down, not broken, even though this broken thing happened, knowing how he can transform that in a way that is beautiful.
And he does that transformation through relying on the work that he does. That's why it takes focusing on like I said before, the complete work of the cross. Back in Isaiah 61, which is just a precursor to what Jesus says about himself when he actually arrives on the planet and starts his ministry. This is that prophecy in Isaiah 61 saying that he's come to say that there's going to be an end of poverty. You know, there's no more poverty for the poor. Good news for the poor. What's good news for the poor? You don't have to be poor anymore. To bind up the brokenhearted. I shared earlier when we were having this discussion that broken heart, to binding up the brokenhearted. There's so many of us, there things have been shattered in our lives. And that brokenhearted, that term means something's been shattered to pieces. Like you've dropped a vase on a tile floor and the pieces spread all over. And the binding means a restoring back to its mint condition. So he's taken these broken things in us and restored them back to mint condition. And most powerfully, later on in that chapter in 61, it says that he's come to make us oaks of righteousness. Everybody's seen oak trees. They're strong, they're hardy. So we become oaks of righteousness. What's right with us through Jesus Christ, as opposed to that shame, what's wrong with us. And so as we focus on that's what I see, that's what becomes real to me. Those other things, yes, they happen. They may have formed the person that I was, but I'm being recreated. Even though there was salvation, that's the first step for all people. For salvation. But as I've discovered who I am, that I'm valuable, that I'm priceless, that's been just such a wonderful truth in my life. Many of us have seen great works of art, you know, a Van Gogh, a Picasso. We wouldn't dream of taking a watercolor and going and trying to fill in colors that we thought were not quite right. No, we're not going to do that. It's a priceless work of art. And that work of art is priceless as defined by what someone will pay for it. We are priceless because of the price that Jesus paid. That life that he gave, you can't put a price to that. And if he did that for me, what does that make me?
Priceless.
Wow. How about focusing on that rather than, I don't think I can live up to that, or I don't think I'm qualified. I think I have to do this in order to shape me, to make me better able to do that thing that I'm called to do. Jesus says, I made you perfectly, just like you are. You've got it, you, Antoinette, Pam. We have a specific design and a call that God's placed uniquely on our lives that no one else can fulfill.
Right.
You are unique and priceless. Focus on that.
Wow.
That will begin to change and heal and enliven. And rather than focusing on yourself and what needs to be fixed, you get to do kingdom and love that focuses out onto everyone else and spreads the glory of God on the planet, because you're no longer focused on what's wrong with me. You know everything's right with me, and now I can share the love of God with the world.
Wow.
That's pretty powerful.
That is extremely powerful.
That's
And
awesome.
I feel as if I've just gotten a reboost
Reboost.
in my own self. I'm like, keep going,
Keep
please.
going. It's so healing. It's
Wow.
so encouraging. It's so life-giving, and it's real life.
Right.
It's the life of God. It's not the life that we try to pretend to make for ourselves.
Right.
And I don't say that in a put-down kind of way.
Right.
It's like we don't think we have options. But the option is Jesus Christ and the finished work. I mean, complete. Everything restored.
Right.
So let's find out what's in the original plan and know that that's where I sit right now in those heavenly realms with Christ Jesus.
Wow.
It's powerful stuff.
It's incredible. And I mean, I feel like there's so much that you can continue to unpack and unfold, but obviously my brain would probably melt just trying to comprehend all of it.
All of ours would. That's why God takes us in those stages. He's
But
like,
it's
okay,
such a good
that's all you
place.
can take.
Yeah, it's a good place to remember and to think about. And I guess in thinking about those who may know Christ in salvation and those who don't, those who may not have that, what are some practical tips that you can give in terms of seeking what your true identity is, or even how to get to that place, or once you've found a place of purpose and identity, how do you preserve that? What are things that you need to do to keep building in all of that as you move forward in life? Because, you know, there will always be challenges.
Always.
There will always be seasonal changes. There will always be things that cause you to question who you are and what you're doing. And, you know, you never get to a sense of arrival, but at least to a sense of stability and wholeness.
Yeah.
I don't know
like
if
you're
they're
on sort of a straight and narrow. You're not veering off to the side somewhere.
So you hope, but yeah, I don't know if you can share.
Let me say this. Once again, we go back to the first step is salvation. There is no other discovery of identity without that first and most important step of realizing that Jesus Christ is the link between you and God. There's no connection to God without Jesus Christ. He is the way. He is the only way. So I say, yes, I recognize what you did, Jesus. And I may not understand all that's involved, but I know that I need a Savior. And so the first step is that saying, yes, Jesus, I accept you as my Savior, and I choose for you to be my Lord. Once you open that door, it's almost like a floodgate is open, because God is then able to share his heart with you. He takes you on a journey to find out how to be in intimacy with him in reality, not just in the word salvation or in the reality of what's happened in your spirit, but he takes you on a process and a journey of self-discovery. So like I said, in my own life, you've got to reach back to a certain extent, not for the sake of pain and not for the sake of staying in a place of unforgiveness, because many of us have had things not of our own accord done to us. So we need to revisit some places so that we can free our insides with forgiveness. Many of us need to forgive with a sense of, where did this identity come from? I have this pain. Where did it come from? How can I rid myself of this? So it's just a revisitation for the sake of saying, okay, I see where I came from. In that revisitation, you're taking Jesus with you. You're saying him, I understand that you have paid for it all. Once again, I may not understand it, but there's a price that you paid to restore me to the love of the Father, not just in salvation, in intimacy. John 17:3 says, and this is life, that I may know him. And that word know is an intimacy. It's the same know that God used when he talked about the relationship with Adam and Eve, that Adam knew his wife and they were one. That's the kind of know that God wants to know us with. He tells us that we're loved, completely and unconditionally loved. He tells us that we're priceless. He tells us that before the foundation of the world, we were on his mind. You, me, individually were on his mind before the earth even existed. How precious is that? as we revisit those kinds of truths and we reflect that, the enemy loses all hold. He loses all power. He loses every bit of what we call strongholds, where he's holding on to that identity, that false identity, that identity of shame that keeps you from moving in what God has for you. You begin to hear his voice clearly. Creative ideas begin to come. Opportunities and favor open up in front of you. God's able to put you on the path to destiny because he's able to fill you with him, as those other things that have filled you and kept you from him are dissipated. They lose their power. The only one that has power in your life is the one you choose to believe. So if you choose to believe the lies that you've discovered, you remain under the authority of that enemy that's tried to keep you there. But if you choose to believe the power of God and all that he's called you to in intimacy, he is now the authority in your life. And a path of light is opened up in front of you. It says the righteous, the ones that are right, because he's made us right, their path gets clearer and clearer. But it's a journey. It's a journey, and it's a journey that's so well worth it, because as you discover those areas of light in front of you and you just walk step by step, it opens up your life. It creates a freeness in you, but it also creates the freedom to share that with others, which is our ultimate purpose and destiny. The details are different for everyone, but that's the ultimate purpose and destiny.
I feel like I have a fresh wave over me, and I
God's
can just
amazing,
listen. I
isn't
love
he?
this. I love it.
God
I love
is
it.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your heart and a piece of you and the wisdom that God has shown you and given you, and even just an opportunity to encourage not only women but many others that need to know these things. And so I encourage you, all of you, to continue to dig deep and to find that piece that is missing, to look for that forgiveness, to look to those outlets to be able to build that purpose and identity, and find other people around you. If you don't have people, search for those people. Find your local church or those that you can trust, or someone to be able to help you unpack that, because we can't do it alone. So we just thank you so much again, and I hope that we can continue these conversations in the future, but we really appreciate just what you're doing, how you're building up others, and just how God's leading you as well too. So thank you all. That's all we have time for. We're talking about purpose and identity with my special guest, Pastor Pamela Davis. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
I'm Antoinette Montalvo. Stay tuned for the next episode of Montalvo International, specifically in our segment of Women In. We just continue to hope and pray that you are blessed and that you reach your highest potential in all that you do. Thank you so much. See you soon.